it's not a terrible idea to know that there are certain events in the game world that are going to happen if either your players end up in a certain place or because time moves forward. Now you have a certain number of turns before you're, like, completely engulfed, and you have to keep making constitution checks and possibly take more acid damage as each round goes on, trying to figure out how you're actually smashing your way out of this.
You'll find games that were originally like $5 in general, and then you'll see the price goes from here to way up there at like $60-$70.
Yeah.
But now it's on sale for like $5.
Oh yeah.
To make it look like a really good deal.
Alex, welcome back to the Mallcast.
Where bears are your enemy.
Yes, exactly. We are now a bear awareness program for.
Do you have bears?
Do you want bears? If so, this is not the podcast for you.
Or if you're going with Pokemon, you could be Beware.
That's true. It's a bee and a bear at the same time. I love bee bears.
It's not like Moss and it. It is not Moss and a panda.
Oh. Anyway, we're actually going to do Total Pebble Knockdown. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am Nathan.
I am Alex, and we are not talking about bears.
Unfortunately, no. We have 3 other subjects that we're going to talk about that are far more interesting, which is amazing.
You know what's funny?
Considering that bears are cool. Yeah.
Sure, bears are cool. Why not? No, it's great. We could classify this as a list show by the fact that we always talk about 3 things. We are now Outside Extra.
Except Outside Extra actually strove for 7 things. So
yeah,
every time it's 7
we're just
things.
paring it down.
Yeah.
They also have like 3 times the staff.
They do have 3 times the staff. They're also far more charismatic than us, so
yeah, it doesn't take a whole lot.
No, it's a low bar. Anyway, let's actually get into our 3 topics for the day. So, a while back, before we had all of our specials and everything, one of our longtime listeners, friends of the show, Datum, had shared with us an article about story and plot-driven campaigns and the problems with them. And
there are no problems.
No, there's no problems with it. It was all a false flag, guys. No, Realm Builder Guy had put out an article back in October, and Datum shared it with us. And I was reading through it the other day, and I thought that the general point that was being made was one worth discussing. I didn't want to get too much into the article itself. I didn't want to read it verbatim. Basically, to give you a little bit of a synopsis, he had been part of a campaign where the GM had a storyline of a campaign that he wanted to see unfold.
As we do as GMs, typically, we go, right. I have a story I'd like to tell.
Right.
I feel like you fell into that trap as well when you were doing your Rift Hunters or whatever.
I did. I had a plan of what I wanted the players to do, and it did feel like they were probably robbed of some agency, which is essentially the point that was being made here. I wanted to cite one particular part of this so that I could explain essentially what his problem was, because they were fighting these hordes of monsters, and they just kept coming because the story kind of demanded it. The way that it was presented, and I'll just quote from the article at this point, now we could still do whatever we wanted in the session and in defending the town, but the final outcome was predetermined. It was the illusion of choice, when in fact we had no choice at all. Aside from killing ourselves, the result at 11 p.m. was already decided before 6 p.m. I'm gonna assume that they started their session at 6 and they were ending at 11. It'd be weird if they weren't, but the general thought process is that before they even started, the outcome was already predetermined, and there really wasn't anything that they would have been able to do that would change where they wound up at. They were going to start at A, and they were going to end at B, and there was really nothing that they could do to change that.
Sure, I don't actually see an inherent problem in that.
I mean, would you consider this to be a term, I don't think we've talked about this term for a little bit while, but railroading?
It really depends on if you're forcing your players to do a specific thing, or if you're really just having a specific outcome.
Okay.
Like, if the outcome is predetermined, it may not be railroading. You can still have your players have a lot of choice in the things they do, but the things they do are still going to cause the event that happens. It's kind of like if you wanted to think of it in different terms, like time travel paradoxes, for instance.
Sure.
I know it's completely off the mark, but like Futurama, as an example, I listened to an entire 30-minute rant about Futurama. I guess a video essay about how Fry is made of time. TLDR, Fry went back in time and killed his own grandfather and slept with his grandmother.
Yes, I do remember this episode. Yes.
Fry, the person he killed was never his grandfather. Fry was always his own grandfather.
Right.
And him going back in time is never going to change that. It's going to cause that. And the causality there is that it doesn't matter what he does, it's always going to result in this being the outcome.
Right.
So, example like that is, you could have, here's what the outcome's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what you do to get there, you're still going to get there.
Right.
Another idea on that would be that doomed hero.
Oh,
Are you familiar with the trope of, I think it's a doomed hero or something like that?
If you gave me some examples, I'd probably know right away what you're talking about.
I guess a different example would be I think the book John Dies at the end.
I don't think I haven't seen that one.
But you know the premise.
We know that the hero is dead by the end of the...
Yeah. So the premise of these are how I enjoy my 40K books, for instance, where those take place in the year 30,000, 10,000 years before the current 40K setting. And if you're familiar with the 40K setting, you are familiar with the things that are going to happen in the end result. But you don't necessarily know the journey that takes you to get there. And so finding out that journey can, finding the story of what happens from point A to get to point B can still be an interesting thing.
Sure.
For me, especially, that setting is really great because I know a lot of the stuff that happened in 40K era. So learning about these characters I knew in 40K that were alive in 30K and what caused them to go from being kind of cool to being kind of insane. Really interesting. You get to find out what caused them to go and their fall, essentially. So I don't inherently see a problem with saying, hey, the outcome is going to be predetermined to a point.
Sure.
But I think letting the players have a lot of agency in the middle of that, here's your point A, here's your point B, figure out how you want to get there and do the things, that's fine. Unless the person who wrote the article just didn't like that outcome was already determined. It sounds more like the outcomes of each thing in between were also determined.
They start to talk a little bit more about some of the suggestions that he would have made about, hearing alarm bells from the town from a few miles away, and then getting options about helping or not helping, and that could still move the story forward in a few different options. The attacks on the town would still happen, and everything like that, but it might change some of the things around for the scenario, but that some of those things would still be predetermined. Essentially, attacks would still happen, and, there would still be sieges and stuff like that, but the agency that the players had would change depending on decisions that they make and how involved they want to get. Had I to go back in time and do a campaign again, I think that I would just be okay with accepting that, here's my point A, and I know that there's certain things that are going to happen in the game. I know that there's certain things that are going to happen in the world at certain times, but to accept that there might be a handful of point Bs that we eventually get to. And that from those handful of point Bs, there's a lot more point Cs that might end up being where you get to from there. So it's not completely off rail where the players go off in a completely different direction, but that there is some agency as to essentially a choose-your-own-adventure novel where you're going to go to some different kinds of endpoints determining based on what decisions that you make in the game. The last paragraph of this, I think, is important to talk about the conclusion that he came to, which I wanted to get your feedback on, but it's a good GM will let the players guide the campaign in the direction that they want to go. These types of campaigns are more satisfying for the entire table and lead to a memorable experience. Robbing your players of meaningful choices is a betrayal of the social contract you have entered as GM. And I don't know if I believe that.
True at all.
I don't agree with that. I don't.
This goes back to what we talked about last week with haggling.
Yes. Yes.
If you, not in every case, I'm not advocating not giving your players agency and choices. Obviously, you do that. You do that.
Right.
If you wanted to play a game where everything was left up to the players, you definitely can, but generally what happens, and a lot of the time, is if you give your players a map and say, what do you want to do, they flounder and have no idea.
Right.
I've done this in several games where I'm like, is there anything you want to do? You're in town, you have downtime, and players go,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think...
It's
yeah.
It's the decision paralysis, where it's the less options you have, the more you feel your choice is impactful. Whereas
Right.
if you have too many options, you feel like you can't make a decision.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So in this case, robbing your players of the chance to make decisions isn't really what you're doing. You're going, there's a story that's going to be told here,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd like to tell it. And I think structuring it can do a lot of good, unless you have a really determined party or players who have a solid idea of a thing they want to do.
Right.
And that's not nearly as common, I think, in gaming groups.
The thing that I think I have a problem with that declarative statement of a good GM will let the players guide the campaign in the direction that they want to go is that also suggests that the GM is not an active player in the campaign.
Also true.
That the GM doesn't actually do anything in the campaign. And if you're the person that put the campaign together, I imagine that you still have agency. It is an interactive medium where the players themselves are going to have something to say, but you shouldn't just then rob the GM of all ability to have some agency over the story, because then that's not really a story. It's not a campaign anymore. It's just faffing around, doing whatever.
Yeah, then it's just kind of a construct of rules and some loose narrative, maybe. But I feel like the handcrafted campaigns can be a lot nicer when done well. But as we've talked about dozens of times, I'm sure,
we've mentioned it
between this show and our last show.
Yeah.
Personally, I find a nice mix of having a idea of where you want to go.
Sure.
And then also having the idea that players will throw a wrench in any plan you make.
Right.
So allow for things to happen. I had that one time with the players who, the archways, you remember the elemental archways.
Oh yeah, I do, yeah.
And I went, if the players do this thing, then they'll activate. Lo and behold, my players did that one specific thing that I just kind of wrote a little thing off to the side and said, if this happens, then this happens.
Right.
They did this thing, me not giving them any information about it. It was just kind of, this may never happen, but it's a thing that the world has set up now.
Yes.
So if it does happen, it has something. I don't need to sit there and go, improvise. I go, oh no, I had a thing for this.
Yeah, and in a more committed sense, kind of like what I was talking about before, I think that it's not a terrible idea to know that there are certain events in the game world that are going to happen if either your players end up in a certain place or because time moves forward. That there are armies that are going to be moving, and there are artifacts that are going to be discovered, and your players might not be there when that happens, but it's going to affect the game world whether your players are there or not.
It kind of goes back to old school World of Warcraft, almost in a way.
Okay.
Where you have the freedom to go wherever you want, guys. Look at you. There's this big world. It's called Azeroth. You can go and take your character wherever you want to. There are no boundaries to these areas. Oh, but the area beside you is level 30, and you're level 1. If you go there, you're probably going to die.
Right. Right.
Now that's all less prevalent because I wanted to let people have the freedom to kind of go and level where they want, how they want, which is nice, but at the same point ruins zone progression.
Yeah.
So it's your players go, we want to go kill that dragon that we heard a rumor about. It's like, it's a dragon in your level 1.
Yeah.
So if your players want to do that, by all means, I say let them do that. But I also say dragons are dragons, man.
Yeah, I mean, that also reminds me a little bit of, like, Skyrim. You know, there are areas in Skyrim that you technically can go to. You can go anywhere you want, but you're going to run into some really difficult encounters early on based on your level. The way I kind of see RPGs is there's a path laid out. It's not that you can't go off the beaten path, but the path is there for a reason. And it's worth understanding that the path is there for a reason. And at a certain point, you want to get back to it. As an
example, the path is very obscure.
Yes. Absolutely. That's why they put down map markers.
Even more obscure, Fallout, which I have not beaten ever because I get there and I go, well, my son is not an interesting plot line. Don't care.
You know what's interesting about Fallout 3 is that there is, in Fallout 3 specifically, I know you're talking about 4, but in Fallout 3, the way that the game wants you to go, where you're supposed to go from, like, Megaton, and you're supposed to go through the sewer system to get to the radio station, and then from the radio station, you're supposed to go to Rivet City, and that's the way that they set up that progression, so that you go into, like, the Washington Plaza, and then you go back out and go over to Rivet City. I've played the game so many times, and I don't think... And until I even knew that that was the way you're supposed to do, I never did that. I went right from Megaton right to Rivet City, and I never went to the radio station at all. And so the game updates you on that, but that was not the planned path. Yeah.
RPGs, specifically tabletop RPGs, tend to have a lot more player input as opposed to like a role-playing game on computer.
Sure. Or
a video game rather. Because you can open world RPGs on computer, you can do a lot. There's a storyline and it's all coded in there. So you can't really go off of anything they would have assumed you would have done without breaking the game or crashing the game at some points.
Sure.
On tabletop, you can get away with a lot more. That comes down to a preference of player group and GM. For instance, Nathan, if you had said to your players for Rift Hunters, said, I have a story I'd really like to tell, and we're doing it for a stream, let's try to keep it to the story and not go as off beaten path and keep it that way. You know, especially since that was for a streaming thing.
Right.
You know.
Right.
In that case, you don't want to be like, players, here's all your do what you want, because it's not as engaging to listen to at that point.
Yeah, that's a performance piece. That's a different
thing. And that's different for sure. Not everyone's going to have a critical role level campaign. And please don't think you're going to.
No, because you're going to be sorely disappointed. And I will say that would have been something I probably would have talked to them about had I, at that point, figured out what I wanted the overall campaign to be. And wasn't kind of winging it because I was brand new at this. And it was totally unexplored territory for me. There is one thing, though, that I guess I would allow for far more player input and less GM input into, and that is the characters' individual storylines. When the characters get into their backstories, that was actually one thing that I asked the players about, which was, I kind of want to know about their characters at the outset. Like, what's your family life like? What was your life before you got here? Where are you coming from? Because that made me think I can set stuff up for their characters specifically so that we can explore some of that individually and see where they want to go with it. And you
definitely can do that if players put in details in their backstory.
Sure.
I personally am not the best at fleshing out a backstory without having played a character a little bit. I kind of get a feel for my character as I develop them and play them.
Yes.
Which is weird when you're playing in a role-playing game and you've got this character you've made and supposedly has a backstory, I know. But, like, I can't just sit down and go, I need to think out this character's whole life.
Yeah, it's not gonna work. I, for instance, had one character who was a spy. Well, she constantly said that she was not actually a spy. She wanted to make it very clear to everyone around her that she was definitely not a spy. But that immediately made me think, ooh, it'd be great if I could set up a thing where we actually have like a cloak and dagger sub-story that goes along with the fact that she's trying to keep an undercover spy identity going. And so that was like one of my long-term plans, was like, oh yeah, no, let's lean into that, let's do that. And that was not something that I would have thought of at the first part, but I thought, oh, hey, that's a good side story, let's explore that. And that was completely guided by the players setting up their characters and deciding stuff about them. Yeah, I don't know if I really agree with the conclusion that the article goes into. I understand the concern that storyline and plot-driven campaigns may rob players of the agency, but it's one of the things where it's like throwing the baby out with bathwater, right? Like you understand that you might need to have less of a path so that players have agency, but if you get rid of it entirely, then you have no real spine to the storyline. You can't. Yeah. You have no backbone to it, and so I would advise against doing that. But
it's a balancing act between having some sort of plot, story, through line, whatever you need, in order to make the story and the gameplay kind of still have it not peter off with people going, I don't know what I want to do.
No.
That way you don't have players that are sitting there haggling with someone when they don't like haggling.
Yeah, they do not like it. They have told me they do not enjoy it. Yeah. The classic.
If your players also request more agency, then you could probably sit there and go, all right, well, we're going to leave this one pretty open to interpretation. Have a couple different, have a couple different outcomes that could be based on different things. But writing a narrative that is open like that is a lot harder because it's a choose your own adventure book at that point.
Right. I like to have worlds that are explorable, but it is very helpful even in explorable worlds to have some sort of central guiding principle of where you're supposed to go so that you don't get lost entirely. You don't want to go so far off the beaten path that you don't remember what you're doing, and that it can easily amount to that. So yeah, no, GMs, I guess what I would say is, yeah, your players are going to inform some of the campaign and it is a collaborative experience, but don't forget that you are also playing the game. And so, therefore, whatever the campaign is, you don't want to forget that that's the campaign, or it's going to kind of come off as a kind of broken storyline. If anyone has some thoughts on it, of course, we'll link the article so people can read it down below, and you can tell me...
yes, don't forget to put your sources in your videos, people who are not plagiarizing.
That's right. Do that. I like to try and at least give you some articles so that you can reference more materials if you want to look into it further whenever we actually use them, and I'll do so in this one, so feel free to check it out. So Alex, I often get notified about forum questions on TTRPGs from Reddit, and
Reddit's a source of all the good things in the world.
There are some very basic, simple questions that come along, some just basic procedural stuff. But then, once in a while, someone asks a question so crazy, I have to bring it up on the show.
Perfect. Great content. Love it.
And recently, I saw one come through, and from the title alone, I knew that I had to read this and find out what this was all about. So, Alex, I would like to share with you this Reddit post, which is actually asking for advice in encounters and adventures. The title, How Could I Make My Party Fight a Church? Okay, so I'm currently yes.
Fight a church, like a building?
Yes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I assume the building is made of I assume this is Monty Python's reference suddenly because churches.
Can I read the
Yeah,
post?
you
Okay.
can. I have not. For those of you at home, I have no idea. I haven't seen this. He didn't share a post. So
I have not shared
we'll
it with
find
him
out.
yet, but I'm fine with you placing bets before I start. That's fine.
Monty Pythons, because churches, they float, they're made of wood, they weigh the same as ducks.
It's
We know.
very
Ducks are witches. That was just one of the things someone in the audience yelled out. Churches.
okay. Cool. All right. So
Whatever.
Okay. Ahem. Okay. So I'm currently planning an encounter taking place on an island with incredibly advanced mimics, with them able to replace and replicate small buildings if necessary. And I have an idea for a climactic final battle taking place with the priests empowering these mimics, only for the church itself to come alive and attack the party. My question is there any way of making sure that this is fairer on the party? As I don't want this to just kill them, but I'm worried that they'll quite literally walk into the belly of the beast. They can be slightly less than cautious sometimes. Should it attack prematurely, as to avoid them all just being eaten? Should it be overly obvious, etc.? Any advice appreciated.
I have only one bit of advice for this person.
You
and
want
that
them to
is
walk
go
directly.
watch the movie Monster House. There are ways
so go
you
watch
can tell.
Monster House. Yeah.
The house was a monster. They could go inside the house.
Yes.
It could also eat them. It's been years since I've seen it, and I don't remember if I watched the whole thing. But you've seen Monster House, right?
Probably.
You're familiar with.
I've probably
It's
seen
a little
Monster
CGI
House.
movie.
Yeah, I think
We're gonna have to.
Monster
We're gonna have
House.
to insert a clip,
I don't want to go inside a monster.
I say it's worth a shot.
Yes, I agree. Let's do it.
and it's got the uvula looking thing hanging down from one of it. Like when he looks inside it, and goes, "Oh, it's a girl house." Because that is adult humor meant for adults, and children don't know better, so they're gonna be like, "What?"
Yeah.
We've all got uvulas, guys. Use your imagination. It was an adult joke. Or maybe just females would have gotten it, because men don't know what that is.
I don't know. Yeah, men probably don't know what that is. But anyway, can't find it anyway. The point of the matter is that the church. Let's get back to the church. Let's stop talking about anatomy and get back to the church, which has nothing to do with that.
Yes, keep
so
your
mimics.
anatomy out of my church.
Yeah, keep your anatomy out of my church, okay? So the church. I am liking the idea of advanced mimics that are so big that they can replicate buildings. That's
Sure.
fun. I like
Then you
this.
just give them templates that are bigger, so they're not small, medium. You have to enlarge them, which gives them less AC. They are easier to hit.
Sure. They're easier to hit, but they have more hit points, so you can keep smacking them.
Potentially.
Yeah,
I mean, just bigger doesn't always mean more hit points.
that's true, but I'm thinking that if you have a mimic that's so large that it can replicate a building, it's probably got quite a few hit points.
Sure, it's
from
a boss
size
fight.
alone. Yeah, okay. Now, but that's not really the question. The question is, how would we make it fair on the party? Because I get the general gist. Okay, you got the buildings, the whole town is basically mimics. Okay, it's just mimics all the way down. And the party wanders on into Mimic Town, and they are now in danger of, being disrupted by the mimics. They're going to just walk right in and get chomped. So the question is there a way to make this fair so that you don't just kill them, so that they just
Sure.
get gobbled up by church mimics?
I mean, for one example, it's a church. It is big. It is huge. It should be slow.
Yes, that is true.
It should be a lot slower than a normal mimic.
Mm.
It should give you plenty of warning signs if you're inside it that something's wrong.
There should be a rumbling or something
Yep.
moving around inside.
A rumbling, some dripping from the ceiling, maybe like
saliva.
acid.
Yeah, like the acidic saliva.
Suddenly the windows shatter and turn into teeth. Like they're still stained glass, like
Oh.
teeth, as it kind of like gnaws at it.
Oh no,
You know,
this is
you
nightmare
see
fuel.
its uvula.
Yeah, you see the uvula.
Maybe the stained glass window on the other end of the church turns into an eye.
Yeah.
Don't know why it's got an eye in its stomach. Doesn't matter.
You could use like the pews and everything to be like the ridges of the mouth or something like that, or rows of teeth, like the actual pews become teeth or something like that. You see eyes coming out of the windows, or you notice that the stained glass windows have eyes on them. Even more fun, if you want to make it more obvious, the stained glass windows look like mimic chests.
Yeah, they just have mimic patterns on them.
They have
fucking
mimic
chests.
patterns on it because it's all the mimic can think to make for the stained glass is just mimic chests.
Or even better, you have like the big stained glass that they have instead of being whatever. It's a stained glass of the church, but it's a stained glass of the church, like with a gaping maw and arms and eating people. So it's like literally just a stained glass image of the church itself.
Yeah.
As a mimic eating people, and you just go, yeah. As long as you roll like perception on that, and then like investigate.
Sure.
To like, or knowledge arcana maybe. Be like, what does that depict? Oh, that's depicting a church as a mimic.
Yes.
Or religion, maybe. And then you go, maybe they put two and two together.
Yes.
And then you go, can you determine that this is the same church you looked at from the outside? What's your like intelligence check there? There should be checks and signs that this thing is not what it seems.
Yes. That would be a good thing to imagine. Any kind of building that is going to be this big is going to maybe give off some signs once you get into it, because you can see the details up closer than you would on a normal mimic.
Yeah.
One that's just disguised as a rock probably won't give you this much detail as one that's disguised
but
as
also,
a church.
like, as I said, it should be slower, it should be easier to hit. It probably won't have the best accuracy, but it's going to hit hard.
What I noticed from a lot of games is that when the enemy is larger, you can telegraph their attacks way easier, and they have a tendency to move a lot slower on the battlefield and with their actions. That's the kind of the trade-off. They hit hard, but they hit slow, and they hit less. Same thing I would say for a church. That's kind of going to be a big thing. Also, I would like to say that it would be really cool if there's like rafters in the church that like the main critical hit spot or something, you have to go up into the rafters to get the...
Well, then you got to be inside its mouth again.
You got to be inside its mouth, but now we're Jonah and the Whale scenario, or Pinocchio. And,
But also, weak points could also be really cool to have on that.
Yes.
Depending, like, does it get up on a pair of legs and, like, loom over you? Then its legs would be weak points. Take out the legs and the whole thing falls over.
Right.
Design it as if you're designing... I'm going to use Dark Souls as an example because they have notable boss battles, but, like, design it like you're designing a multi-stage boss fight.
Yes.
Not that I don't know that tabletop players have the most familiarity with that necessarily, but I feel like most of us play enough games. Most of us, I think, especially if you're designing the encounters in the GM, probably have experience with other games.
Sure.
Be it video games or other just games or media, for instance. Like, take it from something like Transformers, Pacific Rim. I don't know what you want. Something with a kaiju.
Yeah, something big.
Treat it as a giant mech and take its legs out and have it topple over and then have it still be able to attack you, but like now it's like crippled and it can't really move around. And,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's got a tongue and you can pin its tongue to the ground or something.
Yeah. So, do you remember in, like, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, there was, like, a scene...
No, I didn't see it.
Okay. In the very beginning of the thing, Drax jumps into the mouth of a giant monster. The skin is too hard for them to penetrate. He jumps...
Oh, does he kill it from the inside?
He starts stabbing the inner guts of the monster from inside, and eventually breaks out and kills the monster.
Okay.
I would say that's probably a good way to deal with mimics, is from the inside.
Maybe? I don't think that's a very good way to deal with mimics.
No?
They just eat you.
They just eat you, but we're dealing with giant mimics. The rules might not be exactly the same.
I'm not really sure. You'd have to look at the rules for mimics for that one, but also, like, you're in its stomach at that point. Or at least in its mouth.
At least in its mouth, yeah. I'm wondering if anybody actually... I have to look up at mimic physiology. I'm gonna look up mimic physiology and see if they act... Oh, no, they're just gonna tell me about Mimic 3 databases, aren't they? That's not,
That's not what you wanted in the least.
Oh, wait, yeah, I don't know if they really have much of a physiology that we can reference, sorry. Mimicking the human physiology with microphysiological... Oh my god, no. We've gone down a rabbit hole. No, we're not doing that. I guess just make up the rules with mimic physiology, guys. It's just a lot of stuff. If you're going to have your party that's actually inside of the church, we have to kind of model the physiology around being able to attack it while inside the church. But if it's something that's on legs, or that you'd fight outside of the church, it's probably worth figuring out weak spots or how to bring the church down from the outside, or just have the church eat the players.
That's perfectly fine too. Honestly, just devour them.
Have them make Constitution saving throws for like acid damage, stomach acid damage.
I mean, well, you figure the mouth is really big if they're standing in a church, so they'd have to be like engulfed in it. So maybe if they're sitting on a pew or something like that.
Wouldn't it be interesting if the way that the church mimic works is like the doors shut, like, and then there's a mouth that comes down over the doors, and if you don't get out before the mouth closes, then you start to see like stomach acid start to like rise through the floors and get progressively like further and further up. And so
sure,
now you have
to.
Now you have a certain number of turns before you're like completely engulfed, and you have to keep making Constitution checks and possibly take more acid damage as each round goes on, trying to figure out how you're actually smashing your way out of this church.
Yeah.
And, give them, I don't know, maybe 10 turns or something. That'd be about a minute before full. 10 turns to figure out how to get out of this mimic.
That would work too.
That'd be good.
And then they could fight it once they exit, or try to find a way to weaken it from the inside.
If one of your players happens to notice that there is a mouth coming down, or does like an observation check or something like that, maybe they can escape before that happens. You feel a rumbling under your feet. If you're able to do that, I think it becomes a little bit more obvious at a certain point. Okay, so fighting a church mimic, good idea or best idea?
A holy idea.
A holy idea, yes, exactly. Bestowed upon us by the many gods of D&D. Probably Helm. Anyway,
There's the dwarves all along.
Yep. If anyone else has some thoughts on this, I'm also going to share the link to the Reddit post. Feel free to comment on the Reddit post if you have ideas, because I'm sure they could use some direct support on some of the ideas. They've only had a few comments on it at this point. Or let us know in the comments down below.
Tell us how you would fight a church.
Yeah. You damn heathens.
Fire. I would use fire.
Use fire. Absolutely. I'm using facts and logic to defeat the church. Okay. One of our longtime friends of the show, Clayton Calix, who's been on the show a couple times himself, had shared a post with us recently about a spate of fake games that have come across Steam. And when I say fake games, I don't really mean like the problem that they had back in about 2017 that they started talking about, where Steam had a bunch of these games that were just really, really poorly made, that weren't really games at all, that you would pick up for money, that led to more curated experiences down the line, where Steam started to crack down on that kind of thing. What's happening here is games that are in many ways mimicking, to get back to our last story, games that are previously existing, and specifically 3 games that are very, very popular at the moment, Pal World, Helldivers 2, and Escape from Tarkov. And the way that this works is that the developers of these other games would basically model all the screenshots and the names of their games to look exactly like those pre-existing games.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Last Epoch apparently was also part of this.
See, the thing about that is Steam doesn't really like it when you copy another game exactly like that, and they tend to remove your game very fast.
Well, the interesting thing about it is that if you had then downloaded the game and played it, it's nothing like the game that it said it was copying. They're just making it appear the same way until you download it and find out that you're playing a completely different game.
Well, I don't know the point of that, because Steam would just like, oh, you're not getting any of that money, we're pulling it back.
Yeah, which is essentially what they did.
Yeah, but like, do you remember when you played a really a small little rage game?
Oh, yeah. I remember
Called,
Benbow Quest.
Benbow Quest? Well,
Super
that had
Benbow.
been removed from Steam.
Right.
They banned it because the person who made it decided to name it Team Fortress 3.
Yeah.
And that's not even saying it was. It clearly had screenshots that were not Team Fortress related.
Yes.
It was them being silly. They also named it like Mario at one point.
Yeah.
Because they're just trolling. But like, they got a ban for doing that. And it didn't even show screenshots that said Team Fortress. It was just like, yeah, we're just going to name it that. And I went, nah, you can't do that.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it seems like this is from companies that are trying to skirt around the laws incessantly. The developers in question have used several different names. For instance, the developer behind Do Not Smile, which briefly masqueraded as Helldivers 2, was known as Whitehole Games until November, where it changed to Glamourny and then became Fest Studios earlier this month. And they were also behind the fake Last Epoch. Now, something that I looked at, because I was like, okay, wait a second. So, I understand that this is something they cracked down on so that they can't, be those other games. But then immediately I went on to Steam and I was like, but wait, are games like Do Not Smile, are they available? I can't find them anywhere on Steam at all now. As if, the games just got completely delisted entirely.
Probably.
Afterward.
I assume the Steam just looked at this person and went, yeah, we're just going to take everything you have down.
Yeah, and it really wouldn't surprise me if they did that, because frankly, it seems like it's a bad idea. You probably should not do that. One of the things that was interesting that people noticed that led to this crisis is that the release dates were wrong. Because Do Not Smile, when it came out, was in October of last year. So when they say Helldivers 2 released in October, no, it didn't. It released in February, and for a completely different price point and everything.
Yeah.
So
well, there are other things with that too. For instance, so because if you have a game that comes out on early access, it'll say that it has a release date in early access, but then when it goes into 1.0, it'll have the release date from its 1.0.
Yes.
On Steam. For instance, DayZ, which originally came out in 2013, had a release date that was 2013 up until 2018 when it came out in 1.0. And now if you look at its store page, it says 2018 is when it released.
Yes.
So that's another thing. I don't know if they were smart about it. They'd have a game in early access and go, oh, we're going 1.0 to say it was released now.
Yes.
As they change the name and screenshots. Put up more of an illusion, guys. You can be smarter than this.
Yeah.
But please don't be.
Yeah. It was not just Do Not Smile. The other one that was the imposter game was apparently for Figurality from a Soul on Board studio. So, but I looked those two up. I looked up Do Not Smile. I looked up Figurality. I even looked on the choices that I don't normally look at, the ones that I usually remove from my search results. I tried looking by both ones that are pertinent, and also I just went through the lists based on just name, and I couldn't find anything about either of those games now under anything. I also did look just to see if there were any other versions of a Helldivers 2 currently, or a Pal World, or any of those, and it doesn't look like they are. I think that they're probably monitoring that situation a lot more now, so hopefully you won't incur those on these games if you go looking at Steam. But I think it's important that gamers be aware that stuff like this is being pulled. As a consumer, you want to be aware of that, and be aware of dates of release is really important. And also, know that there is a return period, and you want to make sure to tell people that this game is not the game.
Yeah. I know a little bit earlier you mentioned like the curators you have on Steam who can be like, yeah, this is a real game.
Right.
The problem is that some of those are shady people too. Like, I don't know what it takes to be a curator on Steam, and I generally don't look at them or care about them myself. But I was watching a video the other week. Somebody was looking into that. They're like, hey, I've just like noticed that some of my Steam keys were used or like, purchased essentially, but not through me. I didn't get any money for it, which means it wasn't purchased through Steam, because the creator would get money if it was purchased through Steam. And so they looked it up, and as a person making a game, you get, you can track down where your codes came from to see if they're legit, I guess, which is good. But they found out that a lot of the, like, a bunch of the codes that their game had, people had used to get their game, were from, like, a site like G2A. And they never gave codes to G2A, and G2A never paid for their codes. So they tracked down where the codes came from. For instance, they bought their own game on G2A. And then they went, hey, G2A, I've tracked down where these codes came from. These aren't legit. And they're like, went through a whole process with it. Turns out they had gone to like a con or something like that and just given away codes to people. And like, they had a bunch of codes they were like giving away review copies or just like sample copies, to people. Because small game dev, it's a way to get your name out there. Apparently some of the curators on Steam, they'd be like, hey, could I get a review code for your game and I'll review it and whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, hand out a code. But apparently these people will typically ask for like a couple codes so they can do like giveaways or something like that, allegedly. And well, yes, they did review your game. They took the other codes that you gave them and sold them over to G2A. So that's a thing. This also, don't buy key resellers. Don't do that. No. But the other thing is that I watched these. There's a whole other diatribe we can get to about this, but there are videos on YouTube where people go into finding the worst games on Steam. There's a lot of videos about them, and a lot of people who do those. But some of these people go in and they're like, yeah, we're going to try and find like the worst of the worst. And so some of these people will find games that are like $60, 10 reviews, 5 reviews, whatever, $80, $100. And they're like, how does this game cost $100? Why does it have 10 positive reviews? And they'll check it out, and it will just be a sing pile of shit.
Right.
Well, it turns out a way you can launder money essentially through Steam is you can take a game, put it up on like a key reseller, and a lot of these will require that the game is in good standing with like at least positive reviews. Like on Steam, like you actually have to have a verifiable, this has been a game that is whatever, and be positively reviewed. And then they'll sell it. They'll be like, hey, I need like 10 people to comment on it. Here's like 10 codes to my friends to do, or just even the team, just like, or even fake Steam accounts, and just go positive reviews, just copy pasted reviews, and they sell their keys off. And then people will buy these bundles of keys and get like 3 of the keys for this game. And they'll get money for it. And then the other thing is when you watch price history of games, you'll find games that were originally like $5 in general. And then you'll see the price goes from here to way up there at like $60, $70.
Yeah.
But now it's on sale for like $5.
Oh, yeah.
To make it look like a really good deal.
Yeah, I think that there's a rule that you can't do that. I think that it's actually...
Now there is, probably.
Right, well, because it's artificial price inflation is
Yeah.
what essentially it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
That occasionally even happens at retail outlets, where they will say, they'll say, oh yeah, no, it's totally on sale for the same price that we normally would sell for regardless.
Yeah, you and I both worked retail long enough where we know that it goes, oh, this is on clearance, and you pull the tag back, and it's like, ooh, look at that, same price.
Yeah, exactly. It's not uncommon to see. So the thing that I was mentioning before is an article that I had found from back in 2017, because it's one of the first things that actually comes up. This was on The Verge, that was talking about the Steam Explorers program. And this was to try and combat a number of fake games that they were having at the time. Now, these are not the same kind of fake games that we were talking about today. These are not games posing as other games. They are not game mimics. What they are instead were just really badly made games. Really low-quality games that have been hitting Steam at the time. And there was a need to try and create a program that would ask specific people to play through queues of Steam games and give them a chance to flag any that they found compromising. And the more flags that they got, the more visible it would be on the platform. Now, I don't know if that's worked out so well since 2017, considering we're talking about a new version of this problem coming up. But I have noticed that in recent days, do you usually do like the Discover queue for Steam?
When I'm bored.
When you're bored?
And I usually ignore a lot of games.
I've noticed that I am ignoring more and more of them that do not seem to match my typical recommendations for games. They're suggesting a lot more of like horror games and, spooky time ones that don't resemble anything that I play.
Yeah, well, a lot of those have been popping up with the, backroom stuff going on, and liminal space stuff.
Yeah.
Which I'm personally, a fan of them aesthetically.
Yeah.
I think the backrooms is cool, I think the liminal spaces are really cool, but,
yeah.
Come on, I don't need 5,000 backroom fucking games that look all the same.
And
what
lot,
the hell?
and of course, it's not enough for them to kind of go, let's create a liminal space game. They then have to say, oh, we're gonna put monsters in there, and they're gonna jump out at you and chase you around the hallways and the back rooms, and it's like, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't.
They're all the
same.
Play that. It's people have taken the concept and they've gone. Because the Kane Pixel series on the backrooms got huge, and they took the series and they went, this is great, I could make a game out of it. And then they went, we're going to make these really low effort backrooms games and then sell them for $10.
Yes.
Because all the horror YouTubers are going to play them. Just like they play all the shitty mascot horror games.
Yeah, exactly. But, I have personally noticed that the Steam recommendations don't seem to be as good as they used to. I at least felt like they were based on other things that I played or given positive reviews to, and recently it's like, these have nothing to do with anything. Why are you giving me dating sims when I literally haven't, I specifically delist most dating sims, or so that I don't
it's
even
because
see
you occasionally do play a dating sim.
It's, damn you, Kaichu. You probably
what you need to do is you need to make an alternate Steam account for these dating sims and then get them off your other account.
Yeah, I'm gonna just call it Nathan Chu. Saichu.
Nathan Dates.
Yeah, it's gonna be my Saichu account.
Yeah, your Sidadium.
Yeah. Sai-Uwu.
On that note.
Anyway, this has been your public service announcement for today, that sometimes apparently there's these companies that want to pose their games that are not very popular as popular games to try and get you to buy them. Which is, if you notice it and you do see one pop up, please let people know. Flag it as not a real thing. and definitely request a refund, which they should give you swiftly. So with that being said, let us know in the comments down below if you have encountered a fake game of any stripe, and what happened with it. Because there's been a few different types over the years that we've mentioned here on the show. With that being said, I think that we can finally wrap this episode of the show up. How are you feeling right now?
I feel like I need to go to church now.
You need to go to church. That's right. It's a fake church, by the way. Make sure to refund. Refund your church.
It's kind of like a fake taxi.
Yes. You know what? Actually, this is a good. This is another PSA. Make sure that if you end up in the Mimic Church and you put money in the little tray that goes around, make sure to refund that money back before you leave the church. Take back your gold before you get out of the Mimic Church, because the church lied to you, which is something churches often do. Anyway, the point of the matter is, Alex, if folks wanted to find out more information about Total Pebble Knockdown, which is not lying to you, we swear, where could they go?
You can go to our brand new website. It's kind of like the old website, but brand new.
It's mimicking as the new site. Yeah,
it's more simple. Anyways, you can go to our new website over at totalpebbleknockdown.com. New website, same web address.
That's right. We are masquerading our new web site as the old website, and it's the same web address. That's how we're doing this.
That's how domains work.
That's how domains work. And also, while you're there, make sure to check out our Patreon, because we have all the releases that come out over there, as well as some bonus footage for our patrons, and some full extended video ones that come out ahead of time for everybody who wants them. And of course, you can find most of our stuff on YouTube, and on, of course, Spotify and all of the other podcast apps. And make sure to rate and review, subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you get a chance. That'd be great. And you can find us...
Oh, Nathan.
Yes. Yes.
Do you think if I am a cleric of the Mimic Church, that I could have my domain be Squarespace?
You could have it be Squarespace.
This is not an ad read.
This is not an ad read, no. I do like the idea that you would get into the Mimic Church and then somebody would kind of go, "This Mimic Church sponsored by Squarespace."
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, the church can have Squarespace as a sponsor, or one of those food delivery services, because you deliver the food to the church.
Yeah, you are the food. Anyways, you can find us over on social media, where we occasionally post when we're not feeling like social media is burning itself to the ground.
And I usually just shitpost there, so that's always fun to watch. Anyway, you can find us. I am at Satanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and our show is at Pebble Knockdown.
So at some point, we're gonna get like more focused on actually doing stuff on there, maybe, if we care. Yeah. I don't know if I do, but if you wanted to find out what we do over there, go ahead. Fine. At some point, maybe we'll find one of the platforms that we actually feel is, respectable enough at this point that we can do stuff on it, but...
I don't think any of them are.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there.
Thank you for joining us, and we will find you on the next episode of Total Pebble Knockdown, which is totally a mimic in itself. This is a mimic channel. We are a fake channel now.
Yeah.
Chomp chomp.
I'm gonna go make a fake TPK account.
We're gonna make
new videos.
Total Mimic Knockdown. TMK. That's gonna be that's the new channel. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next one. What was that?
That's the Mimic.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the Mimic made a whoa sound. Like it's
sure.
Like it's the wacky clown at the circus. Ooh, I'm a mimic.
Ooh,
I like the worst mime in the world. Wow, I'm a mime. Make a mime mimic. A mimic.
That's just a mimic.
Yeah, it's a mimic.
There you go.
I love that. It's
Goodbye,
terrifying.
everyone.
Bye. Mimic out.